What's going on, everybody? It's Dr. Lightning 94 here with the first video we have had on the channel in a very, very long time. And, it's been a long couple of years here on my end of things. Switched job professions, and then, I haven't been as much into STO lately, and just a lot of changes going on. But with some of the positive changes that the takeover of Deca has had in the Stowe community and such, I thought I would try my hand at a simple video that goes over some stuff that I feel like is very pertinent to the current event going on. So in this case, it's going to be rating all of the Phoenix Prize Pack Epic Token ship choices. Because the current event, as of June 2024, play the event. It's called Control Alt Delete. Make jokes of that what you will, but you get an epic prize token for it, as well as some low B and some other fun stuff. So low B is a much broader spectrum. I might do a video on that later in the year if y'all like this one, but I thought I'd just start off with something simple because every character might have a different need, or you might not have ever gotten an epic token and have never looked at those ships. So this is just kind of a summary of what I think would be good in regards to the ships themselves. So, going over the rating format we're going to use today. So, I have things ranked S through C tier, okay? And the way I went about that is the thought process of, in my opinion, there is no ship in Star Trek Online that is a bad ship. There are ships that perform better than others. There are consoles and traits that perform better than others. There's things for DPS chasing. There's things for debuffing. There's things for support. There's things for tanking. There's things for... there's things for shields, for goodness sake, and we all hate shields. Let's be honest over here. So, there is no such thing as a bad ship and trait and console and all that. Are there some better than others? Absolutely. That is just completely logical in the realm of how you're putting a build together. But I'm kind of approaching this with the thought process of, okay, at worst, everything's going to be average to slightly below average, which is, in my opinion, pretty much the case. You can pick any ship in this box, and let's assume you're 100% free to play. It will automatically be an upgrade for you for the simple fact it's a tier 6 ship. You're getting a choice of a tier 6 ship for free on every character you ever make, of a bunch of ships that most of us that did not play, pre-approximately 2017 or so. There's a couple exceptions, but that's kind of on the whole where the prize pack starts and ends is 2014 to 2017. There's a lot of us that don't have access to all of this stuff, so it's nice to be able to have the option, especially when epic tokens are so few and far between unless you're able to make some monetary investment in the game or grind a lot of dilithium. So, for rating format, just brief going over here. We have a C rating, which is indicating an average T6 ship or an average trait and console set. So that's kind of either or. It's going to be, again, not bad ships, but it's going to be your weakest choices in terms of what will provide the most benefit for you. Again, if you like the look of a ship or just want that ship for whatever reason, I can't knock that. That is your choice. That is your selection. More power to you. If you need help building it, me or whoever you happen to have in your fleet that works with you would be happy to do that, I'm sure. I'm just kind of providing a baseline for you to get an idea of what is going on here. So then we're going to B rating, which is where you have your average T6 ship and an average trait and console. And I'm kind of grading things partially in relation to each other, because a lot of these are from an era of the game where mechanics as far as DPS or other things like bridge officer powers and global cooldowns and such, nothing worked the same as it does now. And it's kind of a wild concept to get behind when you see how far, Star Trek Online has come in the past almost 15 years now. So bear that in mind. Some of these things are graded in relativity. So these are just kind of your baseline, your average ship in the box. So A rating is where you have an above average ship or an above average trait and console within the box's parameters. So you either have a really solid platform for a build or you have a Starship Trader console that could improve some builds depending on what you're doing, especially if you're using that ship, because, for instance, all of the Brain ship consoles in all the Brain ships on this box, they're all locked to Brain ships, so that kind of is factoring in. I'm partially assuming you're using that particular ship. Might not always be the case, but that's just kind of the way I'm going about it. Then there's the S tier rating, which is going to be the best of the best. The ships I have at that, which I'm sure some of you that have been around Star Trek Online a while can probably take a wild guess at. These are going to be either your most overpowered ships or more, truthfully, honestly, what are more likely going to be your overpowered traits, and especially consoles are where those rankings are going to be. Because a lot of the value out of the Phoenix box is out of a couple of these traits and a lot of these consoles that you can put on other builds to improve it. So, we do have one exception to the rule, and I'm going to explain why. And I'm sure some of you can probably take a guess at this as well. So, our exception here is going to be, and I'm going to try not to butcher all these names, so we'll give this our best shot, is going to be the Vorgon Yatara Dreadnought Cruiser. Now, the reason for this is, and I've kind of made a little synopsis over here on the left side of the screen, if you don't want to listen to me babbling on. I've also made screenshots of the various consoles and stats of the ships and stuff, so just to give you some visualization of what I'm talking about as I go through. So, the reason the Vorgon ship is so unique is it's the only 3, 4, 5 aft weapon slot ship in the game. It is the only ship in the game to date that has more weapons in aft than in front. And the reason for this is this ship was designed specifically as a mind layer build. That is a very niche thing, and it's very hard to compare to just about anything else because it is the only ship in the game designed specifically at this purpose. So, the trait and console are nothing to write home about. It does have a somewhat decent layout on seating and such, but for the simple fact of how unique it is, I've chosen to kind of set it aside on the rankings because I truthfully have nothing with which to compare it to until they release something similar, and I kind of wish they would because unique ships in STO always would have been fun, in my opinion. But getting that out of the way, let's go on to C tier. These are your good old-fashioned T6 starships you get out the box that'll be an upgrade out of your level 51 ship packs. So bear that in mind. Some of these might not be great, but they might be a little bit better than what you already have. So, we're going to start out with the Ferengi Nandi warship. Now, I personally enjoy the heck out of this ship, but I'm going to go through why. So, the ship itself, in terms of layout, it's a very awkward ship, okay? So, it's a warship. It's got a warship mastery with crit chance and severity. And the odd thing with this is it's a 4/4 warship. Warships are kind of an odd lame duck in the fact they're not really tied to how they're laid out in terms of weapon positioning. Traditionally, that's 5/3 on things like escorts, or 5/2 or 5/1. Basically, more weapons in the front, or even a 4/3 with the experimental. But warships have kind of always been like the beefier escort. They're like the tactical version of um not scout ships, but frigates. They're basically the tactical version of frigates, where they're a bit beefier than your traditional escort with a few gimmicks built in. In this case, the gimmicks we have built in is the fact this is the only ship in the game with 6 bridge officer seats, to my awareness. Now, we've had a few interesting gimmicky things with bridge officer seats since this came out a few years ago. For example, there's been several lockbox ships with 4 seats, but higher ranking on each seat. Um, the United Earth Defense Vessel has 4 seats, but it has 2 commander level seats. So it has a commander tactical and a commander engineering that are active simultaneously, unlike something like Science Destroyer where you can flip back and forth. Um, so that's kind of a bit interesting. The main reason to pick up this ship, though, because the trait is really outdated. It's the weapon power cost reduction's nice, but you can get that so many other places, and you have things like isomags now. You don't really need to worry about it as much as you used to, although this is more of a vulnerability locator style ship. And the console is not doing really anything because why would I want, exotic damage buffs of a category 1 on a warship? So, but the main reason you'd want this ship is for the Ferengi Bridge. It only comes on this ship, and it used to come on the Decora, but the Decora got retired from Infinity Boxes a couple years ago, and then it got replaced with the Quark Marauder, which is currently an Infinity T6 box ship, and it has a much higher entry cost now since you have one of these tokens per character. So if you have some of the other choices in the box that we're going to discuss later, some of the main boons to your DPS and your survival, this is not a bad ship to pick up just for that perk. Because then you can just switch to this ship, go on the bridge, have your own personal mail, account bank, fleet bank, exchange, etc., Dabo table. Not that anybody uses Gold Press Latinum, but still. You can just kind of have all of that off to the side. It's very handy for trading with fleet mates. Point being, it's an extremely good tool to have in the kit. It's just a matter of it's kind of getting outclassed in every other category. So that's kind of my hang up there. So it gets an overall rating of 5 out of 10. Like I said, there's not a bad ship in the game, so we're starting at 5, which is average. Next, we have the Breen Sartheln carrier. Now, I feel like a lot of people are going to choose a Breen ship, given Discovery just had the Breen storyline in Season 5, and that's kind of going to be a hot topic in Star Trek right now. And they're all not bad. There are worse selections to make than any of the Breen ships. However, this one is probably the weakest of the 4 choices, and I'm going to lay out why. So, I'm a science main, for those of you who don't know, and I thoroughly enjoy the act of just laying on every science bridge officer power I can think of and going ham. With that said, a lot of that relies on a mechanic from the secondary deflector and getting damage out of that. And when you have these carriers, these traditional carriers that only have 6 weapon slots and are designed very science heavy, and you don't have a secondary deflector, it hurts it so much. If it had a secondary deflector, this would go up quite a significant amount in rankings because you've got opportunities for 3 science seats. You've got an intel seat potentially for spore-infused anomalies, and then tactical seat to set off things like superior area denial for your pets. Of course, that's going into much more of a high-end build discussion. the same time, it would jump significantly. The other thing that hurts it is the fact, since it is science heavy, it only has 4 science console slots. And that also kind of hurts it when you're at a lower end. And I'm kind of approaching this from a more lower end style of play. Because if I see somebody getting any of these choices as their first T6 ship, well, you know, I'm going to presume they don't have all of these fancy schmancy universal consoles that you can just pack in everywhere. So I'm kind of approaching it with, okay, what would I then fill in for all that stuff, which would be research lab consoles in the interim, just to get their stats up and get them used to science. And we don't have much room for them. It is kind of frustrating. Add in the fact the console, which is locked to all Breen ships, and the trait, there's a lot better carrier traits out there if that's what you're looking for. Again, this is assuming you're going to work towards stuff, which you can with the event campaign, and the console is just very weak in terms of percentages compared to today's game. Like 5% damage to exotic abilities is absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. You already have a lot of cooldown reduction and damage reduction to shields. If you're hitting anything in advanced and especially elite, even some bosses on normal, it doesn't matter how much you reduce damage to shields. Shields are shields, guys. They're not going to be overly great in today's game. So, the rating here, I guess I forgot to put one on here, is also a 5 out of 10. It is a viable option, but it's just missing a few things that would make it better. Combined with the fact, it's going to be a very slow turn. And I know a lot of people don't really care for slow turning ships. So, next we're moving on to B tier ships, which is going to be basically your average T6 ship out of the box or a trait to grab for fun and games. So, moving on to our next Breen ship then is going to be the Resreth Dreadnought Cruiser. So, this ship has frankly aged very well compared to where it would have been a year ago. So, the way I'm approaching this ship is as a new player who wants a decently sized, tankier cruiser, and they want some beam arrays, they want a simple 4-4 layout, they don't want to have to think about piloting, they can just get in and, go fly and start killing things, and that's totally fine. And with the onset of isomags as a console, that's honestly a much more viable direction now than it was even 6 months ago. Especially since isomags have gotten so much cheaper. It's been viable for, honestly, over a year, but the cost reduction of isomags with random elites being a thing has made it to where it's much more easily recommendable for myself. So, with the 5 base engineering console slots, plus an additional 2 universal if you were to upgrade this to T6X2, the turn rate is decent for a cruiser. It has decent hull mod, shield mod. Inertia's not the worst I've ever seen. Plus, if you want to slot, say, a Fire at Will 3, you have room for that with that universal seat. You have room for a Photonic Officer for cooldown reduction, and plenty of room for some tankier powers. It's a very good average Dreadnought cruiser for people to get used to that kind of play style. You have a hangar bay for a little bit of support there. It's just a good overall average ship. I have no complaints on it. The trait and the console, again, are kind of a product of their time, unfortunately. Obviously, if you have nothing else, anything's worth slotting or using. It's just, there's a lot better out there. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and rate this a 6 out of 10. It's just a solid baseline ground level ship. There's no fancy stuff to it, but that doesn't mean it's bad either. Next, we're going to have the Breen Chell Balg warship. So, in my eyes, this is a slightly worse version of the cruiser, but it's not that much worse. It's just kind of a different styling. It's another one of these 4-4 warships that I was talking about earlier. So you've got, the Commander Tactical. You do have room on the science seat if you wanted to put something like override subsystem safeties for some extra energy damage. And then you have two decently sized universal seats, and you're not getting overwhelmed with engineering. The consoles are split up as such. I would likely run isomags on this ship as well. However, it's also very viable if you want to run vulnerability locators and exploiters as well. That's kind of pick your poison. It does have one of the better consoles out of the Marine set just because of the passive, and that's again grading and relativity. It's giving you 1% critical chance, which back in the day was a pretty significant amount. And 25 drain, this would be not a bad ship to run some Polaron beams on. The mastery is very good. It has the warship mastery with crit chance and severity. In my opinion, if you're wanting the most balanced choices for a Brain theme build, this or the cruiser would probably be your best bets. That's going off ship alone. That's not including console and trait either. That's just, it depends on if you want something a little bulkier and slower or something a little smaller and faster. So this is also going to be a 6 out of 10. So next, we have the Vorgon Rinkadan Carrier. So once again, trait and console here are kind of a product of their time. Unfortunately, the seating is also extremely engineering heavy. However, if you want a slower ship, a big engineering carrier, there's not many engineering carriers in the game. There's this one, there's the Herc Dreadnought, but that's a promo ship. There's really not many choices if you want a flat engineering carrier. So if that's what you're looking for, this is not a terrible selection. So where the specialization seating is located, having the temp ops all the way on the Lieutenant Universal kind of hurts it, because I would much rather have it in the commander seat where you can run something like recursive shearing with pets, but that's, beggars can't be choosers. I am bearing in mind these did used to be event ships and such. They're not going to be the top tier. So then you've only got the 6 weapon slots. The turn rate's slow. The inertia's rough. It does have a very high hull mod. That's kind of nice. It does have plenty of seating for things like superior area denial to get triggered. The trait with the support probe, I doubt it does that much. I couldn't find a tooltip with how much HP, but going off of the time this was made, I would not imagine it would make a significant difference compared to even, your reverse shield polarity and engineering team, which are probably both going to be running on this ship because you have that much seating. The thing that kind of makes it a decent choice if you just want to dump pets and run is the fact it can fit so many hangar craft power transmission consoles, which, if you don't know, it's basically taking your stacking energy weapon levels that you get with isomags and putting them into hangar pets, as well as some bonus torpedo damage and stuff. It can get redeemed there. Just if you're expecting anything more than just dropping pets and running, like, your pets are going to have to be the practically entirety of the damage. You're probably going to get pretty frustrated with this ship and how it moves around. You're also going to have some things like evasive maneuvers, deuterium batteries, and emergency con officers, and things like your competitive engines in order to keep from dying from being so slow. Because it's gonna be a big, slow ship. But if you really just want a simple dump pets and run, it's not a bad ship overall. It's just, once again, a couple of tweaks would make it so much better without making it overpowered for the event ship that it is. So this is going to get a 7 out of 10 for me. So, now we're getting into the fun half, which is going to be A tier and S tier. So, A tier is dubbed the above average explosions. And you see that little clip from Quark's Lucky 7. I stand by the fact that is the best mission in the game. I cherish listening to anybody watch it for the first time, because unfortunately it's a single player mission, so I can't drag them through. But anyway, this is where the fun begins, folks. This is what you came to see. So we're starting out with the newest addition to the Epic Token selection, if I remember recalling correctly, which is going to be the Vulcan T'Pau Scout Ship. Now, this came out in 2019, 2020. I think it came out in both. It was a winter event, and it kind of got delayed with stuff. But anyway, so it's the most modern style ship I'd say we have at our fingers. So overall, it's a very excellent science ship, especially if you have spore-infused anomalies and such available. You also have, it does not show in the screen grab I had of the stats, but you also do have base flanking because it's a scout ship, so that will help somewhat with your torpedoes if you're going for a side torp build or just having torpedoes on to support your science with like the pep and stuff. Seating is extremely, extremely flexible due to your Raider style universal seating minus the commander slot. You can do everything from, torps to just, you could put 5 science seats on there and have every science power in the game. Not entirely sure I'd recommend that, but it would be pretty funny. Or you can put a couple tacticals in there and run something like a fire at will build with isomags and have a Dusai. That's going to be pretty squishy because it's a very squishy ship, but bear in mind, it's also very, very fast. Your turn rate's 19, your inertia's 80. Just bear in mind, it is going to be a little squishy. But if you were looking for a fast science ship, this is not a bad spot. Now, here's the thing that frustrates me. This is another one of those ships that suffers from what I have dubbed the Bordicus, let's put shields on it with the tiny bit of hull regen and secondary shields and all that fun stuff. And he's had a habit of it for years, in my opinion. Not knocking the dude, just it does not work in the game the way you want it to. So, you're getting secondary shields half the time, okay? We don't know how much that is. Going off the bottom 2 numbers, I'm going to guess absolutely nothing. When secondary shields persist, when activating a science or intel bridge officer ability, you're getting 4,500 hit points and 1,200 shield regen. In a day and age where things, even on normal, hit you for well over 10 to 20,000 a hit without critting, without that being their special weapon, that is so pitiful I can't see straight. The console passives are not bad. A little bit of hull pen, a little bit of hull capacity. Never going to complain at that, especially given how squishy the ship is at base. The clicky is pretty much useless. It is basically feedback pulse in a console, and as everybody who's played or talked to people who've played STO for years, feedback pulse has been nerfed into the ground for many a year. So it basically throws itself out the window. It doesn't critically hit. That's a very small percentage of damage dealt, and that's base damage dealt. That's not stacking with all of your bonuses or all of their bonuses. So it's very frustrating on that front. But if you're looking for a good platform, very, very good ship here to pick up. So that's going to be a rating of 8 out of 10. Next, you have the Voragon Xiphus Heavy Escort. I like this escort. It is probably one of my favorite escort selections out of the box. It has a decent turn rate, decent hull and shield mod, good inertia, extra bonus to weapons and engine power. It's a 4-3 with an experimental weapon. I can get down with that. Has a nice balanced set of seating. So you have plenty of tactical seating. You have, like, if you want to run even rapid fire, you can, or scatter volley, you can slot both of those, no problem. Engineering seating, you can put an emergency power to weapons 3 on there. Science seating enough to get a photonic officer on there. And then Your Lieutenant Commander Universal Intel seat still has room for things like OSS that I mentioned earlier, which will buff your power levels even further. It's a very well-balanced ship. I really like it. Once again, the trait is kind of the product of its time. It's summoning one chronoton mine every 20 seconds within 1.5 kilometer of each target's location. That might work on fire at will, but if you're, using overload or something, or in this case, scatter volley rapid fire, whatever you're using, it doesn't really say how it works. And once every 20 seconds, I doubt you're speccing into mines over here. I'll put it that way. And if you're speccing into mines, you're not running energy weapons. It's just a juxtaposition of a trait. As for the console is honestly not that bad in terms of passives. It gives you some crit severity and a Cat 1 bonus to Tetrion. If you're wanting to go Tetrion, that's great. Crit severity is great to have otherwise, especially in the beginner stage. 8% when you're starting out with nothing is not a small amount. I don't know if the clicky is any good or not. I could not tell you personally what harasser probes do or don't do. It lasts for, it's 100% uptime on them. I presume they're just little pets that go around hitting things. I would highly doubt they're very effective. But the console's very nice for that crit severity there. And if you squint a little and put the Platinum Shield on, this is, in my opinion, the best theme ship for building the Orville from the show The Orville. So, bear that in mind in case any of you want to make Ed Mercer characters. So, next we have, and this is the last one in A tier, the Breen Plesh Troll Heavy Raider. Now, this 2, 3, 4 years ago would have been an S tier, hands down, throw out everything. It would have been amazing. Here's what's happened to this lovely little ship. Good ship. Again, if you want a squishy raider that's very, very fast, and you just want tack seating and pilot seating and just go into town, this is your guy. Good raider for a raider. You just got to bear in mind you're going to blow up when the enemy blinks at you the wrong way. It is the habit. You're a glass cannon. But, console is not bad for Polaron, plus gives a little control if that's what you're wanting. Once again, Clicky's kind of a product of its time. Here's the thing with the trait. And it still has uses. However, this is a product of bridge officer cooldowns becoming easier and easier to attain, particularly through things like the Boimler effect. The Boimler effect killed this trait stone dead. So back before the Boimler effect was a thing, and it's a Lobby trait, if you haven't heard, you can look it up on stowiki.net. Boimler effect, when you hit a power, it cools down other powers by a very significant amount, giving you basically maximum uptime on everything all the time, 9 times out of 10. Before that was the case, you went one of two directions with your cooldowns. You either went the case of Photonic Officer with preferably improved Photonic Officer, particularly on a science ship, where that cooled down things passively if you were in a heavy science seating ship, or you went with what is called auxiliary power to the emergency battery, or in this case, aux to bat. Aux to bat required up to 3 duty officers that you had to pick up, which whenever, basically their proc was, and they had various rarities, but I believe the purple ones, which are the best ones, had a proc of whenever you hit aux to bat, it cools all your abilities down by I want to say 10 or 12%, give or take. Might have been slightly more, slightly less. It's been a long time since I've used them. Anyway, so people used to slot, if they had an engineering heavy ship, 2 copies of aux to bat and cool everything down that way. And for a time, it actually did much, much better than Photonic Officer did. Because if you got 3 of the purple quality officers and had room to slot 2 copies of Ox to Bat, you were coming up just as much, you know, almost as much as the Boimler effect does now. But since the Boimler effect became a thing, now it's just kind of seen as a waste of engineering seating. So not a lot of people go that direction anymore, and they can go much more effective places with their duty officers. So the reason this was nice, especially for tanks, which frequently ran Ox to Bat, was whenever you activate Ox to Bat or any pilot buff ability, it causes a all damage resistance debuff to the enemy. It slows them down and it drains their power levels. It stacks multiple times. Tanks always use fire at will, so the more they're firing out, the more it stacks, and it was just very, very, very hefty on the enemy. And it still is very good. It's just gotten outclassed in recent years. You know, it's still a good choice. It's just starting to become somewhat of a product of its time. So that was the main reason people got the ship. They didn't really get it for the console, and they didn't really get it for the ship, especially the tanks of the world that got it just for that. I've used it on tanks before. It was really good in its heyday. So that's kind of what happened to that. And it's just kind of sad. But even still, part of this is nostalgia, and part just because it's honestly a pretty good raider. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. It's not going to blow you away, but is definitely in the upper choices you have in the pack, still to this day. Again, we're grading in relativity. So last we've got here is S tier, which is going to be the best of the best. The next 4 ships are going to be my top 4 choices for you to pick up out of the Phoenix box. Bear that in mind. They're the best they're the best option to do the most with your builds. Okay? So first off, and you'll notice there's going to be a bit more stuff over on the bottom right side here because a lot of these ships come with some unique things. So first off, we have the Krenim Science Vessel. Starting off, it's a pretty decent science ship. You got plenty of science seating, you've got room for spore-infused anomalies triggers, and you can slot an emergency to auxiliary or something in the engineering slot. The engineering seat kind of throws it off just a hair, but again, pretty good ship overall. I've used it before. The console, especially now, well, let me back up a little bit. The console is part of the flagship modification set, which is your Odyssey consoles, your Board Askew consoles, and your Simtar consoles, the T6 variants of all of them. This is the 4th console in that set. And if you're running just a group of the consoles, not all 4 of them, one of them's mid, I forget which one, but basically, originally, before they were Unbound, you ran Adaptive Emergency Systems, Flagship Technologies or something. It's the one where it basically does emergency weapon cycle, but in a console. And then Timeline Stabilizer. And those 3 combined up your resistances, up your bonus damage, gave you a lot of cooldown reduction and firing cycle haste. It was basically like having a mini DPRM in a console set. And if you were running something like a tank or something, it was really handy and is really handy because it gives you some healing and damage resistance with the set bonuses. I'm not going to go into that, but it's just kind of handy. If you're wanting the 4th piece of the chronometric set, the Krenim Chronoton Torpedo, this is the ship you get that on. And it's for a Chronoton Torpedo, you know, it's probably one of your better options. Not that there's many out there, but that's where that comes from. It is a little bit a product of its time, but that's mainly the fact of the trait. And the trait, honestly, this is probably going to be one of the only ships I say, literally throw the trait completely out the window, bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. Because of the fact it's relying on 2 things. Number 1, feedback pulse, and number 2, you getting hit while feedback pulse is active. You're in a science ship. You're not a tank. You don't want to be getting hit. And feedback pulse is objectively, utterly atrocious. It literally does no damage, and it's been nerfed into the ground for years. The crits are also pretty much nothing to write home about. Even if it's stacked up to the 10%, 50%, it's still nothing to write home about when you're sacrificing getting hit to get there. So, that's the Krenim ship. Overall, it's a 9 out of 10. It comes with a lot of cool little gimmicky things. If you're on a Krenim ship and you're probably not going to be able to afford the Anoraks, well, this is probably your best bet. Next, we have what I'm calling the 2 tanking corners, and we're going to start out with the Lucari Hakoon science vessel. Just laying it flat out, this is, in my opinion, a slightly better science vessel than the Krenim one, simply because the seating is similar, but a couple things get switched around. Mainly the fact of the intel seat is now on the engineering seat, and engineering's just not helpful in science, so that kind of alleviates part of that. Very good ship, science-wise. It also turns pretty quickly. It also pairs with the Nakam scout ship out of the T5 Infinity box that just about everybody should have one. It sells for like $1 million on the exchange nowadays if you don't. Or the Drenur scout ship, the Boomerang from your fleet colony. Once you get your colony, I believe up to tier 5 or so. Not the colony itself, but one of the subcategories. You get that to tier 5, and that's how you get your Drenur scout ship, which is an excellent starter science vessel for the low cost of nothing but fleet credits and fleet modules, by the way. Throwing that out there. So the trait is kind of mediocre. It's better than a lot of our ones we've had in this box to boot. It also comes with the 4th piece of the Braden technology set, which is going to be the Warp Core or the Singularity Core. I have them both set right down there. It's kind of interesting that the Singularity Core comes with twice as much control than the Warp Core, but, you know, the set as a whole is very mediocre at best, unfortunately. It's just one of those mission sets that's gone by the wayside. The best thing by far, and the reason you want to pick this ship up, is pretty much entirely the Proto-Matter Field Projector. Baseline. Going off of just getting your skill tree set, not even for tanking, just getting a skill tree laid out, just flat out. This is going to give you basically a 300 to 400% shield and hull regen boost within a 3-kilometer sphere. So if one of your teammates is dying, this is a tanking console through and through. If you're dying, or your teammates are dying, or everybody's dying, and you can group them all up, this will likely keep everybody from dying to the extreme. It is a very, very good console. Very good console. I cannot give it enough praise. It is an extremely powerful regen boost. I would dare say it's a more powerful regen boost than the DPRM, just for comparison's sake. DPRM's objectively probably better overall, but that's because this isn't giving you a damage bonus. It's just giving you a massive heal. So it's a great shot in the arm. It also lasts for, I believe, 20 seconds, which 20 seconds every 2 minutes, you know, that's not a bad ratio for that strong of a buff. So overall, this is a 9 out of 10 as well. Next, you have the Samsar. Now, I have a friend. His name is Darkblade. And those of you that are OGs around the community will have probably heard that name a time or two before. Darkblade is very, very, very famous in STO for designing a style of tanking just off of this ship and its various accoutrements. And I love him to death for it. So I'm going to be smiling a lot reading off this one. So Samsar was one of the first command ships that came into the game, along with the command battle cruisers that each faction has. It's a pretty tanky ship, and it's unfortunately pretty engineering heavy, because you've got a commander engineering, and then A Lieutenant Commander Engineering. Thank goodness that one is able to put command powers in, otherwise it'd be a very bad day. It has aged, compared to previous, extremely well in the ISOMAG age. Before the ISOMAG age, it was basically useless except for possibly tanking, just because of the things you need to be able to get on there, onto the bridge officer seating. Now it's at least somewhat viable in terms of DPS if you have some certain duty officers that upgrade your beam overload, and then you can pack isomags in there. Is it still rough around the edges? Yes, it is, but it is much more flexible than it used to be. It's not great, but it's there. So, going to the trait first, it was not bad at the time, but it's kind of aged out of usefulness, mainly going back to the whole Boimler effect discussion. Recharge on different abilities is not needed nearly as much nowadays. It's just not nearly as helpful. Back in the day, it was great, because, hey, you get that going, you're low on HP, you hit, you know, you getting hit by stuff, and boom, you might just get enough of a difference out of that trait for something like an engineering team or a reverse shield polarity to come up just in the nick of time to keep you alive for the team. So, that was good, and now it's not. It's just one of those unfortunate side effects of time. It comes with the fourth piece of the Kabali set, which is what makes the Kabali set magic happen, which is the Warp Core. It is a pretty standard Warp Core. The big perk there is the Kabali Shield Capacitor, which, friend and self, 25 max on the entire map, does, and that's a pretty low number, but it's much better once you look at it in the game. It gives a shield heal and then an extra shield power setting buff, and also repairs disabled shields. Again, shields are not great in the current game, but especially back in the day, and even now, if you wanted to help the team out, it's not a bad way to do so, and it's a very tanky set. The side effect is you're going to have to run Dust to Dust like 3 times, but according to Darkblade, you run it enough times, you have the entire maze and everything memorized, even when the graphics are bugged out. If you know, you know. Lastly, it's going to be the console, which is basically if the Lucari console was the regen version of the heal, this is the just flat, straight hit to HP. So it's giving you some hull healing. I'm pretty sure that is changed. It's a hull healing percentage now. It does an extremely high hit point buff, which increases as your HP decreases. It basically gives you kind of a reverse shield polarity to your hull, and that triggers 10 times a second. So it regens in a very unorthodox way, plus a massive hull boost. Very good tanking console still to this day. So overall, partially because I'm sentimental because of my friend, and partially because it is genuinely a good console in Warp Core, we're giving this a 10 out of 10. Lastly, but not least, and y'all probably saw this coming, what is going to be the best ship in the Epic Token box by a pretty wide margin is going to be the Bajoran Interceptor. And this is kind of an interesting thing because of the fact the ship is good, and the ship is by far the worst part of selecting this ship as the option. And, some of you may look at me like I've grown a third head over here with Vulcan ears, but it is kind of the truth. So, running through it, this ship is gotten for one thing and one thing only, which is going to be Domino. Domino is a console that gives a bonus to phaser damage and a bonus to accuracy. Very good for cannon builds. And it's basically a mini DPRM for 10 seconds, which is extended to up to 30 seconds if you defeat foes. you're going to get a firing cycle haste buff, bonus all damage, bonus recharge speed, which is category 2 recharge reduction, which even with Boimlers is to such a degree it's somewhat useful, and then a 100% recharge speed reduction for torpedoes. On almost any energy build in the game, this is going to be a good choice. You're going to be able to do more damage, you're going to be able to kill things faster so you take less hits. It is just objectively the best console in this entire pack, bar none. It is not a close competition if you're doing any sort of DPS. Well, any sort of energy DPS, I'll phrase. Science and Torps aren't really going to get by too much with it. Torps maybe somewhat. But anywho, another reason people used to get it, less so now, since things like the Salton Wave Impeller have come out, has been for the experimental weapon Voice of the Prophets, which does an AoE physical damage. It is still one of the better choices in the game for experimental weapons. Good if you didn't get the Rising Corvette. But mainly it's just there for the console. The ship is what I'd call a very average pilot escort. It doesn't have pilot maneuvers or anything to my awareness, and it does have improved radar flanking. So, very good. Trait is good for starter builds, or I believe it used to be used in PvP back in the day. I don't remember, but that's kind of the summary there. So, if you have any questions on all this, and I'll be happy to go into more detail with you all either in the comments or various other places about the universe, please comment below. And as this is my first video back in quite some time, I would appreciate likes and maybe a couple subscriptions if you thought this video was decent. It's nothing special. I just tried to, think out how would I describe all of this to a new player, and then just laid it all out for you. If you do have some in-depth questions, or have basically no idea about any of what I just talked about, or are just looking for a good community to join into, I'm running a Discord server. It's called Infinite Horizons. It is a gaming community based in Star Trek Online, Star Wars The Old Republic, the Diablo franchise, Warframe, and Destiny 2, with more things being considered by the day. We have active presences in all the games mentioned, and if you're looking for a safe place to come and have fun, that does not require you to log in every day, that does not require you to do this or that or the other to maintain your status of membership, that has an active Discord community and is willing to teach you in things like this entire video I just went over, and help you with your STO build and have more fun in the games you're playing, please consider giving us a visit. You do not have to be in one of our fleets to join. Discord link is going to be up on the screen or down in the description. We would love to meet you. So, that is everything I have. This video was a lot longer than I intended. Bless all of you people that have stayed for almost the hour I've been working on this. It has taken me several weeks of work to put all this together just because I'm a college student. I got classes, I got homework, I got a job. I also got a game sometimes, so I appreciate each and every one of you that's tuned in to this point. Sincerely, if you guys have any thoughts of videos you want to see, please put them in the description, the comments below. The description's my half of the equation here. But I sincerely appreciate everybody tuning in here. So this is going to be Doc Lightning signing off here. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see y'all out there. Have a great night, everybody.